Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Well, welcome. Welcome to another podcast. This is Healing Generations, and it's being hosted today from the National Comadres Network. And we're so blessed. We're blessed to come back and join you and come into your house or your car or wherever you're hearing this podcast from. You know, thank you. Thank you for tuning in, and we're always blessed with your presence because we truly understand that it is a decision that you made to come and be with us and listen to us, because you can make a lot of choices that you chose us. We feel so blessed and honored that you're with us. And today is no exception. You know, it's so exciting. And we continue to say this, you know, right, Maestra? It's like we are so lucky to have this privilege to interview and sit and have this casual conversation with amazing mujeres. And today is going to be another one of those conversations. And so really grateful to be here today. And this is Maestra Debra Camarillo, and I'm coming to you from the San Francisco Bay Area. And comadre, how are you doing? And how's it over there in LA?
Oh, we're doing good, comadre. Little by little, we're rising from the ashes. But we keep being grateful that we made it this far and that, we're figuring this out, how to navigate. And main thing is that we've managed to all stay connected. We can't lose sight of that, and that giving thanks to Creator and the ancestors that we continue to be blessed and provided for. And whatever the challenges that we face, we are very blessed. And so I acknowledge Creator and ancestors for that. And
yes,
and very happy.
Yeah, we're excited because we have one of the younger maestras, the up-and-coming maestras today with us.
Yes.
And so let's introduce her.
Absolutely.
Yes, let's go.
Yes. We say up-and-coming, but she's been coming around the block more than once for a long
That's
time.
Right.
She could give us a lesson or two.
That's right.
Yes, a very, very special comadre this afternoon. Been supporting mujeres and healing communities and working for many, many years. She is currently the executive director of the Colorado Circles for Change in Denver, Colorado. Been working over 25 years of experience working in the nonprofit sector, providing leadership programs for youth and all people of color that are rooted in culture, healing, and liberation. She's a powerful circle keeper for mujeres, for youth and familias in her community, and very dedicated to reconnecting youth to their traditions and their culture. She's a proud mother of some beautiful, beautiful children I'm sure she'll speak about. And we're just so proud to have her here with us today. Comadre, Angell Pérez, mija. I always like to call you mija. You are a mija.
Yes.
And I just feel so proud of you. I'm always hearing about all the accomplishments that you're making in your community. Yes. And all the people that you continue to heal. And I know you've had a lot of struggles in your own life, and your medicine has been earned, and it continues to be. And all those that I have had the pleasure to see you work with, just love you so much, and we love you too. So thank you for being here with us, for agreeing. Yes. And maybe if we could just start out a little bit, share about your background, your familia, and a little bit about your journey to help you to get this far. So, Angell, por favor.
Ay, gracias. I'm already going to start crying. I appreciate you both so much, and, your blessings and your love and all of the good things that you share with me. So thank you so much for welcoming me into this space with you all, a very powerful space, joining many powerful comadres who've been on this mic. So I'm very grateful for that. And welcome to everybody out there. Welcome to our space. My name is Angell Maria Juanita Pérez. I am the daughter of Rosina Loretta Montoya from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the granddaughter of Ninfa Maria Larrañaga from Madrid, New Mexico. My grandmother was an Apache woman who was given up for adoption when she was born. And my mom is, as I mentioned, from Albuquerque, and her father, a Mexican man. So my mom is Mexica and Apache, but she definitely identified as a Chicana, having grown up in a particular era where young folks like her were trying to find their power. I'm also Boricua. My father is from the island of Puerto Rico, pero he was very much a New Yorican, moved to the mainland in New York City, in the Bronx, in Spanish Harlem. So I also have that flavor in me, that New Yorican Bori sabor también. I was born to a 16-year-old mother and a 19-year-old father who soon abandoned my mom and me. It must have, I can imagine that it was very hard for my mom. And soon after I was born, I pretty much was given away. And my mom had her challenges and decided, or, felt, I feel like kind of pressured almost to deal with those challenges in ways that were really harmful for her and our entire family. And she began using heroin. This was the 70s, early 70s. And so heroin was kind of the thing in our communities at that time. And that soon turned into like a 15-year addiction to heroin that also she was criminalized for that, self-medicating. And it's interesting, I think, about how the opioid crisis is viewed now as a health crisis. And I think we know why, because it's in the white community, it's in the suburbs. And for my mom and others like my mom, it wasn't dealt with in that way. And so she was very much criminalized. And I believe, as her children, we were also criminalized. We were also sucked into that system. It impacted all of us, and, my grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, everyone around us. And that really informed my journey and how I would come to stand in my power, and the liberation that I seek to have for myself and for my community is really informed by that experience. And living with my grandparents, I also lived with my grandma, my Puerto Rican grandmother as well. Being around my grandparents put me in a really unique position, and it hurt to not have my mom around. And for a really long time, I struggled with that, and I still struggle. But as I've grown in my healing, I realized what a blessing it was to be raised by my grandparents, who are very much 100% New Mexican, very strong medicina from that land over there, a lot of curanderas, a lot of medicine folks, and a lot of great lessons to be learned when you're being raised by elders. And so there's so many things that I can think of that I didn't value at that time. But now in my reflection, in my healing journey, I realize how powerful those things were. And I think of just, I remember the first time I was introduced to the idea of curandismo. And it was, my grandma was really sick. We were here in Denver, and my grandma was really sick, and the doctors couldn't find they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, so that they couldn't provide her any care. And my mom's brother's wife, my auntie, she's from San Isidro, New Mexico, where a lot of curanderas were taught. And we got in the car at like 3 a.m. and drove to over there, San Isidro, New Mexico, which is just outside of Las Vegas. And they took my grandmother into a home to meet with a curandera so she could do some healing on her, and she healed her. And so at the time, I was just mad because I was a little girl being thrown in the car and having to, drive this long way. But now I realize, wow, what a blessing that was to be able to be exposed to that. And there were always hierbas in our home, I still have the manzanilla that my grandpa grew in the backyard. It continues to grow every summer. and the teas and all of those things that I was exposed to that I didn't realize were so important to our people. So I'm very grateful for that in that way. And thinking about my journey, like having to navigate certain things as a child with my mom, definitely informed my experience and how I show up in these ways in the community.
Hmm. Yes, I think for a lot of us on this path, it's always kind of how the beauty comes out of the ashes, right? And we have had a lot of trauma, we have had a lot of challenging situations, and yet there's something significant, or there's something there that happens that then births, this awakening within us, and we then shift the path in which we were going into the path that now we end up in. And I'm wondering if you could just share in your life, because you had your journey, and because I know you personally, um, I know part of that. But can you identify, or maybe just share, what was that pivotal thing that shifted you into the path that you're now, that as a result, now you're an executive director of an organization that provides amazing services for youth and for the community, and dealing with, this intersectionality of all the different systems, trying to put in, or drop in healing into those avenues. Can you think or share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to kind of share a little bit of my journey before I stepped into my liberation and my power, if you will. And so, at a very young age, when I think about my journey, I name that I carry the mother wound. And I think that mother wound actually started in the womb. I know that there was conversations about me, the baby, if I was wanted or not, if I was wanted by my mom, if I was wanted by my father, if I was wanted by my family. There were a lot of conversations about that, and that was, I believe, probably planted in my DNA. Like that was the environment to which like I was conceived, and so I believe like my trauma started there. And then, my mom experienced a lot of heartbreak and heartache in being in relation with my dad that I'm sure impacted me as well. And then, as I mentioned, my mom, soon after I was born, began, abusing drugs, and her drug addiction then led her into, hardcore life in the streets that she oftentimes sucked me into. I remember, she would have to go boosting for her dope, and she would take me with her, and she taught me how at a very young age. I would go with her to cop her dope, and just all of those things that in retrospect really stole my innocence, and I almost became my mom's like comrade, my mom's like crime partner, if you will, like in doing all of these things. And that how that wounded my spirit as a child, as a young girl, really informs how I show up today, and the journey that I went on. And also, like, she introduced me to the street life, and I soon began engaging in those behaviors just like her. I was in a gang, and hustling and engaging in violence, and all of these things that were causing harm to me and my community. And so it was like that was almost generational as well. And one thing about my mom is like she was like always with like the shot callers, and things like that. And I saw that, and I observed that, and that began to model for me what kind of relationships to be in, and who to be around, and things like that, and not in a good way, but that's all I knew. And so a lot of that informs, who I am, and the journey I went on. And, I always wondered why, like, I was so angry, why I was so full of rage. And, I was the one fighting. I was like quick to fight, quick to go there. And everybody around me knew it. So that I was the homegirl, that folks went to, like, for that kind of stuff. And it didn't feel good. I reflect back now and I think of certain situations that I was in when I caused a lot of harm. And I'm like, man, that was really bad. Like, that was really messed up and hurtful. But in the moment, I was so stuck in my rage that I blacked out and I couldn't see anything else. And it was my way of kind of releasing, but it was not in a good way. And it was like that vicious cycle. Then I was causing more harm in my community. But one thing that I'll name that is really important for me to always acknowledge is the love of my grandparents, and specifically the love of my grandpa, my mom's dad, and who was my most precious ancestor. I reflect back and I always know and say that, like, I witnessed, no matter how low my mom got, my grandpa always loved her. He was always there for her. He always bailed her out of jail. He did whatever he had to do, thousands of dollars of money, all of that. And he didn't have a lot. He worked 2 jobs his whole entire life. But everything, he modeled that for me. I would watch and see that. And she'd be sick and she'd be kicking and he'd be right there taking care of her. And I saw that. And as I grew, into a teenager and young adult, and I started doing a lot of harmful things where I would have be calling them collect from jail and things like that. He would always love me. He would be the one right there. And no matter how far or how low I got, he always lifted me up, and he always told me he loved me. He always told me he believed in me. He always told me he knew I would have a good life. Never, ever gave up on me. And so that first teaching of acknowledgement and unconditional love that Maestro Jerry teaches us was shown to me by my grandpa. And I was in a space where I couldn't really see it. But now in retrospect, when I was when I was on my knees searching for something, I remembered that unconditional love that my grandpa showed me. So I'm so grateful for that. And it was a lesson that I pray that I am able to pass on to my children and all my hood children that I work with. So those things really informed my journey. My mom crossed over just a little bit over a year ago as a result of her drug use. She contracted hepatitis C and ended up dying because of that. And as I reflected on her journey and my journey and preparing for her services and things like that, I always remind myself that there are certain things that we just have to endure. And as much as it hurts, I believe that my mom's journey positioned me to be able to do powerful work in my community with women and girls that are experiencing the same things that me and my mom experienced. And so in that regard, I'm very grateful. And I'm just trying to look for the lessons that Creator's presenting me through all of this tragedy and trauma. Like, what are the lessons and how can I find the good in those things? And also having compassion for my mom. I know that colonialism affected my family. My grandmother was an alcoholic, and my mom had to deal with that, and that is a result of colonialism, I believe, because my grandma's mom was an alcoholic, my great grandma, and those are things that have harmed us in many ways. And so when I was able to look at it from that perspective, then it helped me have compassion for my mom. It helped me have compassion for my grandma as well. And those things are really important as I continue to move my journey forward and work with folks in my community. And then I also think about carrying on a legacy. Like, my grandpa really modeled for me what in La Quech meant, what the collective meant, what the interconnectedness of our community was. And I remember, he didn't have a lot of money. He fought in World War II and was able to access the GI Bill. And for them at that time, they didn't funnel them into higher education or anything like that. They put them in trades and things like that. So he was a welder. So he was a welder by day, and then he would clean offices at night. And I remember my whole life, that's the life he lived. But one thing I always remember is that every month he donated to the GI Forum and to LULAC. And it wasn't a lot of money, but I remember that was part of his finances. And I would ask him, like, what are you doing, Grandpa? And he would always say, I've been blessed with a lot of opportunities and a lot of things. And so now I have to give back too, you know. And also I remember a story when I was a young girl. I was probably like 6 years old, and we were driving down the highway. It was late at night. It was very cold out, and there was a man walking on the highway, and he had kind of like maletas and bags, and he was walking, and my grandpa pulled over and invited him into the car and gave him a ride to where he was going. And when we arrived at that destination, he opened his wallet and he tried to give my grandpa money. And my grandpa said, no, you take your money and you just be safe and be careful. And when we dropped off, we drove away. I asked my grandpa, why didn't you take the money? Like as this young girl, I'm like, take the money, Grandpa. And he was like, Mija, we have to help our people. We have to help our people. And we have a car that works, that's warm. And so it's my duty to help him. And I was just like, why did you take the money? That's all I kept thinking about. But in retrospect, I think about how he modeled that lesson to me of taking care of our people. And through all the trials and violence, and, I've witnessed murders, and I've had people in my family murdered and friends. And, I watched my brother be sucked into the juvenile justice system at the age of 12 and be committed until he was 19. And now I see the ramifications of that on his health. I believe my brother lives with a broken heart, and that's why he has heart disease and, diabetes and all of these things. But through all of that, the lessons come back from my grandpa and how he loved unconditionally. And he may not have ever said, you are sacred, but he showed me that in the way that he loved me, in the way that he forgave me, and the way that he never gave up on me. And I think that is an example of the beauty of our ways before white supremacy came, before colonialism came. We loved our people and we cared for our people and we didn't throw them away. But white supremacy shows us in many ways to throw each other away. But we're reclaiming that, way of our ancestors, of love and compassion and acknowledgement. And I'm so grateful to have been connected to folks like you, my hood mama, my hood auntie, my spiritual mom and my spiritual auntie, and Uncle Jerry and the teachings that he shared with me, and so many other folks that have also influenced how I show up. And for a long time, I've done this work for a really long time. And I started it because I got pregnant. I got pregnant with my first son, Andrew, and I always tell him, he saved my life. That boy saved my life, because when I got pregnant, it changed the game for me. And I knew there was something in me, and I think it was my grandpa's palabra, that I could not bring a child into the same life that I was brought into. I could not allow him to be exposed to the things that I was exposed to. And I decided to change my life. I had been kicked out of school in 8th grade, and I was just in the streets doing what I had to do. But I tried to figure it out, and I went back to school, and that, put me on a completely different path. But I started doing this work because I wanted to impact young people. But I also was doing it from a wounded place. I was still, stuck in that trauma, and I hadn't healed that trauma. And even though, I was like a rebel without a cause. One of our maestros here, Ricardo Romero, my Uncle Rich, he always would tell me, girl, and he's a pioneer in the Chicano movement. And he would tell me, girl, you're a rebel without a cause. But I had a cause. But I think what he was saying is I'm just all riled up and I want good for my people. And so I did a lot of good work. I'm not going to take that away from myself, but I was also doing it from a wounded place. And so I know that along the way, I caused harm to people I love, people I worked with, people in my community, because I was still in that wounded place and I didn't know how to liberate myself from that. And the game changer for me was really being able to sit down with my spirit. And it was on the heels of a divorce that broke me completely down all the way. And my first step was to get therapy for my divorce. And then what that did was actually show me my patterns of relationships that were rooted in my wounds and why I was picking the people that I was with. And that helped me so much because it was not about the person that I was in a relationship with. It was about me and my choices.
Yeah.
And how I was making those decisions. And it was really rooted in my wounds and trauma. And that's when I went on this journey of reclaiming my sacred self. And so many people have helped me with that. But really, when I was exposed to Maestro Jerry's teachings, that was a game changer for me. And I'll never forget, we were in a room full of folks and he looked at all of us. I want to say he looked at me, but he looked at all of us. And he said, no matter what, exactly how you are sacred and you are loved and you deserve to have a good life. And that was a game changer for me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
I know a lot of your medicine comes from your wounds, like most of us. A lot of your actions and choices were rooted and taken from a place of your woundedness. But I just want to reflect back to you. You're very rooted to your grandfather's teachings. It shows. I can feel it. I see it in you, and his spirit is very much alive in you. His love and his teachings continue to pour through you. I know that's a lot of the medicine that you give to these young girls that you work with. And like most of us, that do this work, our pain becomes our passion for the work that we do. I'm wondering in the girls that you work with, and being rooted in your grandfather's teaching and how to pay it forward and how to take care of our community and our gente. Is there any specific story that's inspiring that you would be willing to share with us that confirms for you? Especially when we do this work for a long time, we always think, sometimes I know I've gotten in these places where I start thinking, well, there's just such a great need and we need to do more. And maybe I need to take a different approach, or am I doing the right thing? Or do I need to switch it up? Just because it's grueling sometimes. It's just day after day after day. We're dealing with so many different things and people's situations. But I know every time that I have gotten to that place personally, and when I'm second guessing and thinking maybe I have to change my direction, I'll always get a confirmation. Something will happen or come up, or creator and ancestor will remind me, like, no, this is where you're supposed to be, and this is what you're supposed to be doing. I'm wondering if you've had anyone in your path like that along your way, a story of any of the girls that they gave you that confirmation as well, like, oh, good, I had a breakthrough, and it's making a difference, and just gave you that strength and that inspiration to stay the path.
Yeah, there are so many. I first will just acknowledge that, like, I work with a team of young chingonas. Mm-hmm. Like, they are just so powerful and amazing, and so I see it like every day, and I'll never forget, the multiple times, but I can think of really specific times where in Círculo, they've just thanked me for acknowledging them. They've thanked me for believing in them, and they've thanked me for providing a space for them. And so that is a constant reminder every day when I look at them. But there's one story in particular, and it just resonates with me because I just saw her post that she turned 35. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm old. I've been doing this work for a really long time. And she's more like my little sister, but she was in one of my programs many years ago as a high school student. And, I remember we were launching this girls program, and I was like, man, I'm going to the jets. I'm going straight into the projects to recruit girls for this program. And I was out there, talking to different folks and stuff like that. And I met this young girl, and, I started sharing with her about the program, and we clicked. And she came and she signed up, and through our relationship, we just started getting to know each other. And her dad was incarcerated. Her mom was abusing crack at the time, and she had 4 younger siblings, so she was the oldest. And she carried a lot, she had to hold a lot down in the house. She had to make sure her brothers were good, and it reminded me a lot of me. And so, throughout our time, we began to build and get to know each other. And, I remember she played basketball. And so I'd go to her basketball games and I'd be the only one there for her, but I was always there. I was cheering her on and screaming like a loca, like I know how. And I just, I really wanted her to know that she was loved, that she had adults in the community that cared about her. And so we, had a really strong relationship, and she experienced a lot of hardships. Some of her brothers were already incarcerated and they were younger than her. So she was going through that, and there were times when she wasn't even able to go home. They couldn't find her mom, things like that. And I remember one night in particular, she couldn't go home. And we even sat outside, over there in the projects. We sat outside, waited and waited and waited to see if her mom was going to come. And it was like 11:30. And I was like, you're going to have to come with me. You're going to have to come and stay at my house. So I brought her to my house. And I remember at the time I was married, and my husband bought me a really expensive fancy watch. And I put it on the end table in the living room, and she was all set up and going to sleep on the couch. And, went upstairs and I went to sleep. And the next day, got up, breakfast and everything, took her home, went to work, whatever. And then later on, I came home and I realized I couldn't find my watch. And so I remembered I had put it next to the couch, and I was just like, tripping out on like, how am I going to approach her about this without shutting her down, without pushing her away, but also like holding her accountable. Like, here I am really wanting to support you, and come in a good way. And you're stealing from me. And so the next day she came into the office and we were hanging out, and I asked her about it, and she denied it and said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, I believe you. And that was it. I left it at that. In my heart, I knew that she most likely had taken it, but I didn't want to throw her away. I didn't want to shut her down in any way, because there's a bigger picture here, and I knew that she didn't have a lot of folks to hang on to. And I was one of those folks that she was hanging on to. And I took that, responsibility to her very serious. And the next couple of days, we're still doing programming and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden she shows up one morning in my office with the watch. And she gave it back to me, and she apologized. And
Oh, wow.
she said, I don't know, what came over me, but I just saw it and I took it, and I thought it could help me. I thought I could sell it, whatever. It was like a survival mechanism. It was almost instinctual of like, she's living in survival mode, and she knows that every single day of her life is going to be a challenge, and that she has to figure it out. And so that was a really powerful, powerful lesson for me, in that it's a process that even when folks cause us harm, we have to figure it out. We have to continue to love up on each other. We have to have compassion and understanding. And that teaching came from my grandpa.
Yes, absolutely.
In retrospect, in reflection, that teaching came from my grandpa, because again, when I was at my lowest, when my mom was at her lowest, he didn't give up on us. He didn't throw us away. And so I was able to model that for her. And now she's like so amazing. And I asked her if I could, I messaged her and I said, can I share your story? And she said, you absolutely can, because you were the one person that created the mother that I am today. And that is powerful for me.
Absolutely.
Because she also had the mother wound. And I was able to love up on her. And now I see she has 3 amazing children.
Wow.
And they're in gymnastics and dance and basketball and school this and all of these amazing things. And she is always there at every single one of those activities. And she has an amazing partner. And to me, that was a way that I was able to role model my grandpa's teaching and plant that seed in her. And now she's planting the seed in her children. And that's what transforming generational trauma, ending cycles, and creating generational medicina and reclaiming of our goodness and our sacredness. So that's just one story in many, many that give me inspiration, that give me hope, and that remind me that I have to give the investment. Just like folks, I did not get to where I'm at on my own. We are interconnected, and I have chosen family like you all that have invested in me and treated me like a precious jewel, even when I felt like I was a piece of coal. There was something that others saw in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. And now I pray and I call on the ancestors to guide me to be able to deal with my people, with those sacred hands in that way. So,
thank you, Mija.
Yeah.
Thank you. God
Yeah,
bless you
that's
for
Comadre for that story. And what a blessing, what a blessing to be able to see that. Like you're able to see, there was this investment that I'm sure even at the time you didn't even connect it. You were just acting out of what your heart, wanted to do. And so, you talked with this young woman, but you were able to actually see the return of your investment, where her life is now flourishing and stuff. And que bendición, right? What a blessing to see that, because a lot of the times we never get to see that part, right? But we continue to invest because, of course, we know that is going to be that end result. And we never know when those words that we plant will then begin to flourish. And which words are they?
Right.
I mean, when I think about when you shared about your grandfather and how he's seen in you what you couldn't see within yourself, to me that resonated so much because I remember in my own journey, my father was pivotal in that way where I was lost in my addiction. And he would come and say, Deb, I'm going to see the day when you're okay. And I would look and say, this guy has lost his ever loving mind. He's, it was a time where it wasn't even a consideration for me. There wasn't a thought of changing my life. But yet, as I reflect back now, I understand that was the investment. These were little seeds. I see in you what you can't see yet. And I know that there's listeners out there that, these words are resonating with them. Your story is resonating with them because they can identify those significant people that have crossed their path or words that have come and birthed life in them that probably the person that ever said, that said it will never know. Will never know the gift of those actions and those words. So thank you, Miha, for sharing, these stories. You also mentioned something, and I just want to come back to that. And you mentioned that you were already engaged in community work and really trying to make a difference within the community, but you were operating from your wounded self. And I would, can you just elaborate a little bit more on that and the importance maybe of why that should be congruent?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about this work, that's probably one of the most critical things that we have to ponder is how are we leading? Are we leading from our woundedness, or are we leading from our heart and spirit and our sacred self? And, for me, like I was fire. And it's so important that we stay close to the fire, I know, but that water is also really important, and to be able to flow, in a calm way sometimes. And I was definitely operating from a place that was rooted in kind of the anger that I had at my experience, my lived experience, at the systems in place that continued to cause our communities harm. And that impacted my relationships with other people. It impacted how I led, even those close to me. Like, I know and I pray that these folks have been able to find forgiveness and compassion for me, like folks that I've been the direct supervisor of, and how I've shown up in ways that I wasn't able to find a balance. And therefore, I caused harm in the way that I supervised, in the way that I led, in the way that I communicated with folks, my expectations of them. Again, because I was really coming from this place of rage and anger at the system and things like that. And it probably also took away many opportunities for me, opportunities to be in partnership with other organizations, possibly opportunities for funding and things like that. And also just the relationships I had with my family and my children. Like, I didn't have a work wellness balance, if you will. And so I was working so much. I was always stressed out. I would come home and snap at my kids, snap at my partner. And it was because I hadn't done the healing that I needed to do to position me to be able to find balance in my life. And that is what's so, so critical, because the system is still there, right? The white supremacist systems that cause harm, that create the school to prison pipeline, that created mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex and all of these things is still there. And I have to learn how to navigate my work in these ways. But I have to center myself in my healing. I have to center myself in my wellness, because if I don't, what's going to be the alternative? Maybe I start drinking. Maybe I start causing harm to myself in other ways and having, a bunch of boyfriends or whatever that, may be. And for me, I'll be honest, and it's still kind of a problem. I have like a shopping addiction, and Maestra Debra knows that, but it could be problematic. Like that's, I remember times when I'd be so like stressed out and I would go like blow a bunch of money on shopping because I had that high. I seriously got a high from going and buying a certain thing that whatever. And it caused problems for me in my relationship. Now it's my own money, so I do what I want. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that when my point is that when we are moving from our wounded self, we try to find another vice, and we don't show up in a good way. We don't show up in a way to be in good relations with each other. Because como yo, I was fire. And now I have that balance of fire and water. Now I can say, this is triggering me. My body's, I can identify, like when my shoulders tense up, that's a trigger for me. And I need to say, okay, what's going on here? And I need to step back and figure it out. So I have these tools, and I'm going to be on my healing journey till the day that I die. Yes. I'm going to be learning. I'm going to be in my deathbed. And I pray that when I take my last breath, there's a lesson there. Because I'm not perfect. I'm human. And I have a lived experience that's always going to inform who I am. I'm going to have highs and I'm going to have lows. And so I just have to equip myself with the tools to be able to navigate those situations and circumstances that cause me triggers. And that is all coming from my intentional healing journey. Yes. And like figuring out what is at the root of why I'm making the decisions to be in the relationships. Like forever, I didn't know, like, why am I with this dude that's like causing all this harm to me? And I realized it's because I'm like modeling what my mom showed me, and and being with folks for the wrong reason, whether it's because of the power they held in the hood or whatever it was, the money they had, whatever it was. And that was not good for my spirit. And now I've been alone for a really long time because I've had to focus on myself. Now I know my healing has informed whoever comes into my life to be in partnership with me. I can choose them from my heart and spirit and sacred self as opposed to my wounds. And so that is why this healing is so, so important. And also, again, I'm human and I'm going to make my mistakes along my journey, but I am stepping into Maestro Jerry calls us the elders. As a matter of fact, my brother Cisco just did the podcast on the role of the elders. So this is a good time to name that. I'm preparing myself to be a good elder. That's my where my heart is. I'm preparing myself to be a good elder, and that means that I have to walk the talk. I am role modeling for people around me. My team at my organization are all much younger than me, and I have to role model for them how we show up in a good way, what good leadership looks like, how we, heal people, healed people, and I need to embody that. But also while having compassion for myself and knowing that I am human and I have people like you all, I have elders to lean in on when I make mistakes and to learn and to teach me. And so that's why I believe it was a game changer for me in regards to my work. It really positioned me to step in my power in a good way, and to be able to bring in the folks that I needed to support my work, because now they see my light as opposed to seeing my darkness before.
Wow, beautiful, mija. Yes. Heal yourself and heal others. A very good quote. And you're absolutely right that the journey never ends. And I agree with you. I hope I do continue to keep learning. I'm always searching for anything, that's going to help me be a better person and be the best that I can be as well. And so I could pass that on to the next generation. That being said, as we come to a close, preparing for elderhood and not only teaching what we know, but living what we know, continuing to walk our talk. I'm wondering if you can share maybe a couple of consejos that you would like to offer to others on their journey that would be helpful in terms of their own health and their own healing. I know you have such beautiful children. I'm sure you've shared many, many consejos and continue to. But what are maybe a couple of them that you can leave with our listeners, including ourselves, Maestra and I, that we need to be mindful of and that you want those teachings to continue for the next generations to come?
Yeah, thank you. That's such a powerful, powerful question. And when I think about like my consejos for the next generation, I think about what is my legacy going to be, right? And when I think about that, I reflect on the folks that made it possible for me to be here today. And I think specifically, like when I reflect on like the work that we're doing in community, I think of like those elders from like El Movimiento and those times. And they have done incredible, powerful work to enable or to allow Angell Pérez, this Afro-Latina, to be an executive director of an organization. But I also know that during those times, many of those folks weren't allowed to center their healing, right? For me, it's a blessing to be able to center my healing. And so the reason why I share that is because I see a lot of our elders who did some powerful work during like the Chicano movement and the Black liberation movement, but they're so wounded, and it's important that we center our healing so that we can break that cycle and we can heal for them. I'm healing for them. And so two consejos, two palabras that I'm going to share would be one of humility and accountability. And so it's connected to what I shared about my lifelong journey of healing. And I know that I am going to make mistakes along the way, and I will probably cause harm to people because I am a human being. But I pray that I have the humility to be able to sit myself down or be sat down by the ones that love me and hold me accountable to the harm that I cause. And so I hope that I'm role modeling that to the folks around me in the way that I lead, even at the organization, and the way that I parent my kids. Me and my daughter, Isabella, had a really tough conversation last week. We were both in here crying and holding each other because I caused harm to her. And she held me accountable to that. And so the first lesson is that I think that I've shown her how to stand in her power and hold me accountable to the harm that I caused. And I hope that she does that with the people around her, with her future partners. And she said, Mom, this was really harmful to me. And I had to have the humility, and that's hard. You know, as a mom, like, and again, like, my parenting was hard. My parenting was like, I didn't want my kids in the streets. I didn't want them doing the things that I did. And so I felt I had to come from that like tough love. And that was probably not a good thing. And I caused a lot of harm to them because I was like, I hate to say it, but I was like, I'll beat your ass if you're not home by your curfew. Like I remember Maestra, how embarrassing. She asked my daughter, so what makes you, you know, stay on the right path or do what you have to do? And, you know, she's an amazing daughter. She's a junior at Howard University, full academic scholarship, on her way to law school. And Maestro asked her, like, what has kept you? And she said, because if I don't, my mom will beat my butt. And I was like, oh my God, no. But, you know, so I was like, I was sitting in that circle, like dropping down in my chair, like, no. But I was that tough love parent. And I realized that that was harmful. And so Isabella, you know, along the way, we've all grown together, and Isabella held me accountable. And I had to have the humility as a parent to not be como respond muy duro, right? Like hardcore, and just, and be soft with her and humble and listen and acknowledge the harm that I caused to her, and together co-create a way that I can fix it and how we can move forward. And I hope that I model that in the way that I lead at the organization. When I make mistakes as a leader, as an executive director, that my team is able to come to me and hold me accountable in a good way. So humility, and then accountability to the harms that I cause. We're all going to make mistakes. And I just pray and I ask you both and anybody else out there who's listening right now to me, who love me, if you love me, and I'm causing harm or not coming in a good way, please invest in me enough to sit me down and help me learn from those lessons and help me be better the next day. Because every day I reflect and I want to be a better woman than I was the day before. So I'll just leave it in that way.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I see that about you. And I'm privileged to have you, you know, within my life, and that humility. And what maybe some of the listeners don't know, you know, Angell Pérez has been the recipient of many awards, you know, and been called upon, you know, throughout the nation. And her humility and the humbleness, she'll sit down with anybody. And that's really, you know, putting forth really those teachings where it becomes active in our daily lives. It's not something that for today or for these hours we pull off the shelf, assume this role, and then put them back. It's living the teachings on a daily basis. So thank you, Mia. And as we have come to the end of this podcast, and time goes so fast, and I just appreciate you, listeners there that have been with us throughout this hour. Thank you for joining us. And I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this has touched your hearts. And we, you know, are here because it's an investment, is like the name of this podcast, Healing Generations. And the words that were spoken today, I hope they can help you heal so that you can continue to heal those future generations within your legacy. And so I thank you for being here, Mia, Angell Pérez. You know, it's been a pleasure to sit with you today and have you here as our guest. And I also want to say, if you want to look us up at the National Compadres Network, and you can find the National Comadres there, and it'll have the services that we offer to the community. And so talk about circles that we have, a newsletter that goes out on a monthly basis, and Café con Leche, and a monthly affirmation with the recipe for a cafecito there too, that I know that you will enjoy. So with that for today, this is Debra Camarillo, Maestra Debra Camarillo, signing off today from the Bay Area. along with
Maestra Susanna Armijo.
and our guest.
Angell Pérez, thank you. La Socamati, and many blessings to all of you out there. Thank you.
Thank you, and bendiciones.
Bendición.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.